Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the media show. I'm Nick Pallavi. I'll be your host for today, and we have a really great lineup, and we're going to be discussing leaks in the media. And first of all, we're going to bring our leaky person in from the military. He used to work in military intelligence. If that's an oxymoron, I don't know what is, but let's bring in the Honorable Chris Greco from military intelligence. Chris, welcome to the show. Okay, I was wondering what the leaks are going to be, but one of them is military leak, believe it or not, that we're going to look at. We had two big leaks today that went to the media. One is military, as you well know, where we gave away the fact that we're sneaking on you telling Ukraine where the Russians' bodies are buried. But let's bring our other panelist right now from the Esports Network around the world. Let's bring in Mark Semig. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Good
Yeah.
to be here, Nick.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at leaks today in the media. You should know a lot about that. In
Oh,
esports, the Supreme Court had a big leak, as we well know, and also we've had some military leaks that have taken place. With that, we have another honorable gentleman, the co-author of The Millionaire Next Door, and also Richard the Millionaire, former marketing professor at the State University of New York in Albany. Let's bring in Dr. Bill Denko. Dr. Bill Denko, welcome back to the show. You should be able to help us with this one. Media leaks. Okay. That's a big one. Sometimes I do it on purpose, but maybe not. Do some leaks. From the High IQ Society, let's bring in a gentleman who lives in Los Angeles, the home of the Leak Central. Let's bring in Rick Grosner. Rick, welcome to the show. Yes, you can help us with this one. Leaks, and what do you do about it? And then our final panelist hails as he was actually a media major, one of the few people I know that actually majored in this area, heads the online dinner party, and keeps together the IBM TV network, which broadcasts in 122 countries, and the Roku network. Yes, we have our own Roku channel for those people who don't know. You just go to Roku, type in Pod TV, and you'll see 20 of our shows right now that are running. Let's bring in Mark Lee. Mark, welcome to the show.
Glad to
You
be
can
here.
lead, you can lead this one. You probably know more about than I do. It's media leaks that we've experienced. A couple
Well,
of
I
them.
mean,
One,
it's not anything new to be experiencing media leaks.
yeah.
I'm sure many of our folks know on this panel. I'm sure that Chris Greco and Bill Danko can remember there was those famous media leaks that took place way back when we had that thing called Watergate, and there were definitely leaks all over the place during that time. And of course, there have been leaks in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, and now that we're in the year 2022, there's been another media leak, even though usually it was people that were in jobs that folks were expecting to have leaks, meaning the political landscape. I don't know that we've had a leak of this sort in the Supreme Court in some time and all of that, because usually it was the politicians, and sometimes they might be leaking because one opponent wanted to say something over the other and all of that. But definitely those leaks have been out there for a while, and definitely this is just another example. But I don't know if Chris has got something to add to that, as I was giving some of that historical aspect of the fact that we've been having these leaks for a long time. I would argue there were probably leaks going on back in the Lincoln days.
Yeah, we'll start with Chris. Dealing with the military leak, which is a big one, that the United States is spying on Russia and pinpointing where generals are so the Ukrainians can shoot them down. And unfortunately, that now got out to the general public. What are your thoughts, since you used to be in military intelligence? Then you realized there's no such thing and you left.
Right? so I know I've never heard that one before, Nick.
I thought not.
But I'm going to tell you, basically, now they're saying, well, we didn't really tell them where the generals were. We told them where the mobile units were and where they were moving, and how often they were moving, and what the speed they were moving. And I thought, you could try to cage that in whatever language you want, but the bottom line is that if you give away certain bits of information, it's like I always say, and it's like I always say to people, period. Nick, you're on Facebook, right? Oh yeah, I'm on Facebook. Do you put your birthday on there? No. I never put my birthday on there. Now I put my month and day, but never the year of my birth. I see. Do you ever put your age down anywhere? Well, yeah. Guess what? I can find out everything from that. So basically what happens is when you give bits of information, bits of intelligence, people just have to extrapolate that, and all of a sudden now they have what the sources and methods are. Once you give away sources and methods of intelligence, you're done. It's basically like doing a fingerprint and then basically cutting off that finger, because you can never use that again. You cannot use that source and method again. Either they're going to be dead, that's number one, or the adversary is going to basically go around that bit of communication. So now, and feed false communication to that sources and methods. So now you have nothing. So you have to be really, really careful. And as I've told Sasha, whatever we're feeding the Ukrainians, we better damn well understand that when this is over, and it will be over, that we can trust them enough to be able to, because basically we've made them an intelligence partner. So now, they're sitting back saying, gee, US, why don't you give us some more intelligence? And we're going to be feeding them intelligence. And you don't know where that intelligence goes. It could go to the hackers. There's a lot of hackers in Ukraine. Tons. There were tons there before Russia invaded them. They were a major source of hacking against the United States. Believe it or not, Ukraine was a major source of hacking against the United States. Now all of a sudden we're giving them intelligence. I don't know. I get it. I understand. We have to help them defeat Russia. But you start doing this stuff, you got to really, really be careful about that. And that's where leaks go. I mean, they don't go just into the ether. They go to somebody. And that's where you have to really, really be careful about what you're doing.
But Chris, aren't leaks
Right.
similar to, and I'd love to hear maybe even Rick's thoughts about this as well, but there's all kinds of strategies that go on in the world of politics and in the world of media, leaks being one of them, another one being the old famous ambush. And apparently that's what happened to Jim Clyburn recently and everything. And I think that he's the majority whip, if I remember correctly, but he was having an old fashioned fish fry in South Carolina, probably trying to get his campaign going and everything. And definitely, he's been in office forever. So trying to get it to stay in office and all along those lines. And somebody came by there and they basically cornered him because they wanted to know what his opinion was around reparations, because definitely that is still something that is out there in the African-American community. So he was cornered and basically he dropped the F-bomb, and that became like a YouTube moment where everybody was sitting there going like, wait a minute, did he just use the F word and everything? Because he was basically like, I've been on this issue forever and everything. So I've actually been trying to have my own way of making it happen, and I'm going to drop the F-bomb. And I heard the F-bomb dropped even in the, it wasn't quite dropped, but they did admit that they were a little bit on the intoxicated side in the Kentucky Derby. So sometimes folks also in the media will try to corner you knowing that you're probably going to do something stupid. That's just to put it honestly, and all of that, because that's part of the game that is played as well. Any thoughts on that, Rick?
Yeah, Rick.
Yeah, well, I come from comedy. I wrote for a late night show for 12 years, which is the opposite of intelligence, where I have zero expectation of privacy. And if I couldn't get a laugh by making a joke, I could get a laugh by sharing something humiliating about myself, like my botched hemorrhoid surgery. I would tell everybody in the room, all the other writers, and they'd laugh at that. There was another writer who'd tell everybody whenever he accidentally pooped his pants. One of the points of comedy is to bring secret things to light. So my attitude towards, I'm delighted when there are leaks. Except, in the case of like national security, I was reminded of the Benedict Cumberbatch movie about breaking the German Enigma code machines. And one of the major plot points was that they had to continue to let the Germans sink ships so the Germans didn't figure out they'd broken their machines.
The Enigma. Yep.
Well, that's the same with Coventry. Coventry was a direct result of the British intercepting German intelligence, German information, saying, "Look, they're going to bomb Coventry." And they went to Churchill and said, "Look, we need to warn the people of Coventry." He says, "No, we can't. We have to let them bomb the city." And they said, "But why? You're going to let them bomb the city or High Wycombe, wherever it was." And he said, "Yeah, because we cannot reveal these sources and methods. If we give advance notice to this city, we mess us over like crazy being able to intercept the German intelligence. We have to let it go. And he did. And it was a firebombing situation. I mean, Coventry was the worst bombing, the most hideous bombing that was ever done during the German-British warfare aspect. So
Hey,
same thing with wizards and everything else. Sure,
hey, Chris,
you're
one
right,
of my
Rick.
favorite TV shows used to be, and this is dating myself once again, was Hogan's Heroes. And definitely that one German person would always be seeing that things, but claiming that he never saw anything and
I
everything,
know
because he
nothing.
was definitely, I see
Schultz.
nothing, I see nothing, and all of that. So I was wondering how much of that actually goes on in some of these other militaries. I doubt it happens in ours, but maybe it does. But definitely, I was remember that as always being one of the comical lines was,
all right.
I see absolutely nothing, even though it's actually taking place in front of me.
So let me give you a real honest to God life story about an intelligence leak. And I wasn't involved in the leak. I actually caught it. So I was in charge of a NATO intelligence cell back in the 1990s when situations were with Bosnia. And I was the first Air Force officer ever to lead this NATO intelligence cell. And we had French and Germans and Brits and Canadians and Belgiques and Italians and all kind of different NATO representatives from intelligence. The French, and this is why I hate the French. I just hate the French. This is the reason why, is because one of the other countries came to me and said, "Sir, I just have to let you know that the French are taking our intelligence, the intelligence the U.S. and the Germans and everyone else was giving them. They were tearing off the classification off the top and the bottom, and they were sending it via unclassified fax to their people in Bosnia." And I said, freaking believable. I said, "You saw this?" He said, "Yeah, we saw it." So I brought the French in, and they pulled this bull crap like, I don't, like they didn't understand a gosh darn word you were saying. And I said, "Look," so I brought in a Portuguese guy of all things who could speak French. And I said, "You translate. I know what you're doing. If I catch wind you're doing it again, I'm going to have you in handcuffs and I'm going to have you taken out and you will never come back here again." One more. I said, "I never saw this. This is secondhand knowledge. I get even secondhand knowledge of this. You're done. Done." Are we understood here? And they kind of, they couldn't understand what was going on. I said, "I don't give a crap if it's an international incident or what. I'll be handcuffed and left." And after that, they never did it again. But I mean, the bottom line is that that's it. That's what they call an inadvertent leak. And their big thing was, well, it's okay because we're French and we were sending it to French troops and they needed the information and whatever else. And I'm sitting there going, "You're idiots. That faxes can be intercepted in a second. Can be intercepted."
No, I hear you and everything. Hey, Bill, just out of curiosity, you wrote The Millionaire Next Door, and of course, another group of people that love leaks, and I'm being sarcastic when I say that, are the millionaires of the world and all of that. So I just wondering your thoughts about leaks and even when they take place in the status of the business community, because I do know that the corporate folks do not like leaks either, and particularly not our millionaires. I imagine that Elon Musk has not wanted to hear some of the things that have come out about him, included even with Twitter. But any thoughts about leaks, even from the business community standpoint?
Oh, absolutely. They want to have security. I mean, keeping a low profile. But when that security is breached, of course, there's trouble. It's as simple as that. It comes down to who do you trust? And how do you protect yourself? The expression, Chris, loose lips sink ships. Right. That's exactly it.
In God business, we trust, all others we monitor. That's
right. Well, look, in business, especially in contracts, we have non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality. And, there are penalties if you breach that. What kind of penalty do you have when you just have, an informal understanding of what ought to be done? I mean, whatever happened to the code of honor? I mean, look, the military schools, even in my school, I would have students on a test, I got no help. I gave no help. This is my work. That's essentially what has to be done. I mean, but people don't abide by rules. So that's the problem. That is a huge problem.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, to the other Mark who spells his name the wrong way and everything, yeah, I got to teach you about that and everything along those lines. But you are in the world of videos, and I know there's a whole lot of leaks to be coming out of the gaming world and all of that, because every time we turn around, there's a new game, and then there's a copycat game that comes almost immediately after it. And I know that there's probably some proprietary right even in that sense. I'd love to hear your thought about games and gaming and the way that leaks can impact the gaming industry.
Well, there are in fact a lot of leaks that come, and as I mentioned in our previous show, Twitter is one of the most famous places for media to pick up on these things, because it literally puts a tool in the hands of somebody who may be sitting in a room or in a place where something is revealed, and they feel compelled to want to break it for any number of reasons. Sometimes it's just ego. It's that they broke the story and they feel really proud of themselves for having shared it. They're important. They want to be important people, and they want to be able to break things. In other cases, there's a more malicious intent. I would say actually on the gaming side of the world, it's less malicious and more about people who just want to be important and they want to break a story. But I think we find a lot of stories that break in those terms. Some of them, of course, the facts are not the facts. And I think that's the one thing about leaks that I see, quite frankly, is what is the intention of the leaker? And what is their true knowledge of the situation? Sometimes they think they know what's going on, or heard something and they think they know what's going on, and they share that. And the reality of it is it's inaccurate. And that in itself can really spread wildly before it gets under control. And, as Bill pointed out as well, this can cause a lot of problems. And I think militarily, it's pretty shocking that we've got people that would be sort of beating their chest about, exchanging classified information. That shocks me. And I don't even understand why the Biden administration announces every kind of weapon that they're sending to Ukraine in the first place, and how much they're spending and all the rest of it. I also, find it a challenge that we're spent, the most recent $33 billion request, is double what we spend in an entire year for our budget on our own border. So, I mean, there's a lot of things here that there's a lot of people, a lot of different feelings. And I think that inspires people to try to drive a message. So just a few thoughts.
Hey,
Yeah, Rick.
Yeah, we're talking about leaks, and in the media, at least, overshadowing the Ukraine leaks is the Supreme Court leak. So we should probably throw that into the mix.
Yeah, I was just going to get into that. The U.S. Supreme Court, which, when you're clerking or you're working for a judge and you're dealing with confidential information, which is the opinions of these judges, you're not supposed to hand stuff like that over to the media. Because first of all, these are draft opinions at this point in time. Because the way the Supreme Court works is they do drafts, they actually circulate it among the judges, and then they do a final, and then they get the final published on their time frame. Somebody in the Supreme Court inner circle, which had to be the justices or the clerks, and notice I said justices because you can't exclude justices. I mean, one thing about the justices, the justice system, just because you're a Supreme Court justice doesn't mean you may have an agenda and you may actually have leaked it. In other words, you can't just say, it's like a crime. You just can't say, well, they're excluded because they're a Supreme Court justice. But it's either a justice or a clerk, somebody that had access to this confidential information, turned around and gave it to the press before the final opinion was published.
Well,
Now here comes a very
that comes back to Watergate, which I brought up earlier. And everything. Because I mean, I still don't know if we ever really found the identity. If we did, Chris, and I'm been missing it all these years. But did we ever really find the identity of Deep Throat? There were all kinds of
Yeah,
theories.
they did.
but I
They
don't-
actually,
Yeah.
they actually
Yeah,
did. The person
they
who
did.
Deep Throat came forward to say who he was. But the real question is this: let's imagine, because Justice Roberts is going to do a thorough investigation to find out who the leaker was. What happens if you find the leaker? Should the suitable punishment be to the person who leaked this confidential information from the Supreme Court? There's really no laws on this, so it's going to be maybe an
Well,
ethical
Well,
I imagine-
national
well,
security. You could put it under national security, Nick.
yeah.
You can
Well,
put it
yeah,
under national security. You can put it under national security, but
could.
again, it
there's no
raises
direct law.
two interesting questions. If it is a clerk or an employee, I imagine that the logical solution would be to fire them and everything. But if I remember correctly, Supreme Court justices are appointed for life. So unless there is a process to impeach a Supreme Court justice, which
There is.
I have not
There
heard
is.
of with everything. So if there's one, but you'd have to go through that whole legal process of actually getting that to happen.
I thought that would bring a firestorm. Yes, Bill Denko.
I can only imagine there is some sort of penalty for this leaking in the Supreme Court. You know, in academia, even if you have tenure, there's still a clause that says something about moral turpitude.
That's right.
That you can get fired
Right.
even with your lifetime appointment.
Yeah,
So,
Bill Barr outlined at least 3 federal laws that would be able to be used in order to address this situation and if it were someone working for one of the Supreme Court justices. And there were very obvious laws, one of them which is using information for your own self-benefit,
Sure.
using information that could change or is intended to alter government activity or action. I mean, there were 3 laws that stood out immediately that Bill Barr outlined last week on this. So I think in addition to the fact that the person would be disbarred if they're an attorney,
That's correct. Right.
would never work in law again.
That's right.
Not that they want to, they probably want to go to work for, a liberal, MSNBC or something. But the reality of it is there are serious consequences. I think the other question that I haven't heard anybody ask yet or raised, not necessarily in our group, but in the media is, if there is a person, whoever that person is, who else is involved beyond that person? Who put them up to this?
Sure.
Who else are they connected to? Who else is involved?
There has to be another person because somebody received the information, Mark. So the thing is, there are 2 people involved. One, the person that gave the draft opinion, because the drafts get circulated all the time. One person gave the draft opinion, but there's also somebody who received the draft opinion. You see what I mean? So there are 2 people involved.
There also could be people that motivated that person at the Supreme Court to do this, that
Correct.
conspired with them and encouraged them and is supporting them in this whole issue. So that's the question, is how deep does this go in terms of other co-conspirators in this?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, Mark, I get it. I understand where you want to say, look, and Nick, there's people that received, there's people that did that, and
Right.
But let's talk about Snowden for a second. Snowden was not in any way, shape, or form pushed into revealing all that information. It was solely done that I shouldn't say that. People go 2 ways. One, it's a principle issue. Hey, I'm a principled person. I'm going to do something because I think it's right. I'm going to reveal this stuff. And it's monetary. It's like, I got all this information. He still is sitting in Moscow. I have not heard a peep from this guy, but I'm going to tell you right now, he has a lot of information, and I'm sure Putin is sitting there going, hey, can you give us this info? That's why I get really, really scared about giving intelligence to the Ukraine, because Snowden is out there with tons. Let me tell you something, tons of information. He's got a lot of secrets that he stole from the United States, and he's sitting in Moscow with them. And I'm telling you right now, Putin is sitting there going, and he's releasing them little bits at a time to Putin. Otherwise, he'd be dead. He'd be dead either way. So, a lot of people do that. And everybody in the panel, I'm going to tell you right now that if Snowden ever comes back, which the way I would do it if I were Biden, but Biden is just not, he's not smart at all. I'm sorry. Neither was Trump really in this situation. But what you do is you say, come on back. We will not prosecute you under the Espionage Act. We will not prosecute you about stealing secrets. That will not be a problem. You come on back. The minute that he sets foot on U.S. soil, I would charge him with identity
Espionage.
theft.
No,
Identity theft, and whatever you want to call it. 100,000, because he's got every single employee that worked basically for some of the intelligence agencies. He's got that. And guess what? It's more than just my name. He's got my birthday. He's got all that stuff. So basically, he committed identity theft. And I would have him in there, and I would take a civil lawsuit against this guy. And every single penny he ever makes for the rest of his life will go into some fund somewhere. And that's, be like, O.J. Simpson. You can't get him on murder. You get him on something else, and you just take him to a civil lawsuit, and that's it with that. And
it seems to me you're not a Snowden fan, then, I would imagine.
Not a Snowden fan. I don't think.
I put a bullet in this guy's head, not a problem. If you told me that, seriously, I'd put a bullet in this guy's head. But you know something? What would that prove? Nothing, right? But you bring him back, you make him suffer for the rest of his life. I'm good with that.
Nick, I got a question for you, because we're talking about the negative aspect of this particular leaks, and I don't doubt that the ones with the military and the ones with the Supreme Court and the abortion decision are very much negative. But let's also remember that in the media, you did talk about my experience in the media, it is actually the relationship that happens that some of these leaks are actually the reasons that some major stories have been broken. Because, a good journalist will develop a relationship, say if you're in a town with the mayor, maybe the mayor's secretary, or maybe the mayor's aides and things of that nature. You might whisper in their ears and find out what they might tell you that is not being just regularly reported by said governing office. And I'm sure that goes on in the White House. I'm sure that goes on in the state government. I'm sure that goes on in a number of other places. I know that I've worked some of those kind of connections myself, and everything is just being a media person and all of that, both as a print journalist, and even when I've done this whole electronic media, radio and television now and everything, well, internet television, but I've done a little bit with other types in that sense. But that being said, and I was also going to use the example of political prisoners, and yes, we do have some of those in the United States and around the world. So definitely that's another case where I would think that a leak would be a good thing, because, let's take Leonard Peltier, or the gentleman from Move, who I think had some health issues and all of that. And if there are people in the prison system that want to tell about those things and reveal that to the media and everything, in those cases, I think it would be good, because you don't want just people to disappear in our political system or in our judicial system, just like you don't want them disappearing there in Russia.
Yeah, but I think, Mark, you have to distinguish between what is confidential information and what is not confidential information. In other words, there are a lot of government agencies, including one I work with right now, that like to control the information that really should be available to everybody. In other words, it should be available to everybody that is part of government, but they just don't want you to know. So they create their secret meetings, secret information, and then they control it. But it should be, in Florida, where I practice law, there's a government in the sunshine. There's a right for the people who are citizens to know about what government does. But then there's some information that is classified. In other words, things that people don't have the right to know, similar to what Chris is dealing with. You don't want to pinpoint, here's our military installations, enemies, so when you want to bomb them, go ahead and bomb them. Or, like even the Supreme Court, these are draft opinions, we're still circulating, but we're going to leak it out anyway. That's a breach of confidentiality.
It's a breach of confidence, but let me just give you a hypothetical. And I'm not saying that I have any word of this happening or anything, but let's just say, and I do have both of my vaccines, but let's just say that it was found out in Pfizer Pfizer was a leading developer of the vaccine, that something was done wrong in the development of said vaccine, and one of those doctors or administrators wanted to then let out that information, and they decided to leak it to a media source. Would you have a problem with that and everything? Because definitely that seems like that would be in the public's good to know that if the doctors were, maybe they're troubled by their conscience or whatever, and they're like, look, this is not, y'all are good right now, but in 5 years y'all are going to turn green. So I just wanted to warn y'all and let y'all know y'all going to turn green in 5 years. I'm being a little facetious when I say that.
Yeah, right. In other words, there's something that is bad that could happen, which they actually determined the J&J vaccine. Apparently, 3 out of 1 million people will develop blood clots. Okay. And that is information that the general public should know about. In the area that I work in, there's a couple things that are confidential, HIPAA, that deals with your health. And the other is Fair Debt Collection Acts. Those 2 things are confidential that you don't disclose. But generally, most all the other information should be freely available in government to the people that are the participants in government. And there are certain things like what Chris works in, military intelligence. You don't, if the CIA has people that are undercover, you don't want people to know about it. If police departments have people undercover, it's not for general consumption. And so the thing is, what happens, there's a breach of trust and confidentiality that takes place when this happens. But what you're saying, if there is a corporation that's developing a vaccine and you work for the corporation and you have knowledge of adverse material that is being held back by the corporation, do you have an obligation to actually disclose that? Those questions are very difficult, so I'll turn it over to Bill Dinko since he's a professor, and he can answer that question. What are your thoughts on that?
It's called the informed conscience, isn't it? And we all strive to have an informed conscience and doing the right thing. But what guidelines will we be using? I mean, even in academia, a number of my colleagues refuse to go to these, Monday afternoon, let's talk about our research forums, among our colleagues, because you know why? They thought some of their colleagues are going to steal their ideas. Right. Mm-hmm. So you tend to, and that's more widespread than you can imagine. You can't even trust the guy next or the gal next to you at the office. Saying, well, wait a minute, we're all academics. We're all in this together. Our job is to publish or perish. And the stakes are high. And therefore, we're going to keep this secrecy. Now, getting back to something that's life and death, as opposed to something innocuous like another business research paper. Doing the vaccine. I think there's a moral obligation to make that known.
Right.
But you know what? And sometimes this idea of secrecy can get you into trouble. I mean, it pains me when I look at, the way the Catholic Church kept secrecy on the scandals. And it wasn't until they were compelled, especially in New York State where I am, we're going to have a look back of 20 years. And oh no, there's a lot of secrets that had to be revealed.
Right.
So sometimes it becomes it's scandalous is what it is, and it's wrong and it's bad.
Well, in law practice, you have what they call a motion to compel, to grab information, and the general rules of discovery, which people don't know. Almost everything is discoverable. And I say almost because you also have protective orders that you can actually protect certain information from being out in the general public because it has no relationship really to the case. And so lawyers argue that stuff all the time. What is protected?
Speaking of lawyers arguing stuff all the time, and I want to get back to my good buddy, the genius in hand and everything, Rick, because he's been involved in the television industry, also involved, if I remember correctly, at least having some knowledge of it in the gaming industry and that part of the game. I mean, like game shows and all of that. And I remember historically that there was a lot of game shows that became a whole issue, the issue of secrecy and things being leaked, because I think they've leaked out clues. I think they've leaked out, at least in some of the reality shows, the fact that some of these people, which is a not too secret fact, are actually paid actors and things along those lines. But I just love to hear your thoughts, Rick, about how sometimes that whole notion of secrecy and leak can either be beneficial or unbeneficial within the television industry. Because I do know that that was a big thing in the game show part of the world.
Expectations of fairness on game shows have, I believe, largely evaporated. In the late 50s, there were the scandals that charismatic contestants were being fed answers so they would do better than other contestants. And the entire nation was appalled. Even Eisenhower, as president, released a statement saying how disappointed he was. Then 40 years later, I sued a game show I was a contestant on, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, because it's a multiple choice show and they asked me a question where the correct answer wasn't one of the choices. And I was super pissed and I sued them and I lost. But this was in the year 2000. I would not attempt that lawsuit now because nobody expects fairness on competition shows. They become subjective. There are all these reality competitions, cooking and judged things where you can't, at the same time I was suing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, somebody else was suing Survivor, saying that the producers had favored more charismatic contestants over her. She lost too. Nobody's ever won suing a game show.
No, that's not true, Rick. The lawyers win on those all the time. So.
Well, yeah.
We always win.
I'm the biggest loser in the history of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire because going on that show cost me $39,000.
Right.
I won $1,000 and I spent $40,000 on lawyers.
Right.
But yeah, the game show landscape has changed, but other privacy landscapes have changed also. Like if you're trying to write a crime plot, a heist movie, it's very difficult to set it now because A, people don't use cash, and B, there's a camera on every corner or a Ring camera on every porch. I mean, imagine trying to have an affair now compared to having an affair in 1952. There are so many more ways to get caught. You leave breadcrumbs every place via your phone, social. So I have zero expectation of privacy in most of the things I do.
Hey, Nick, along those same lines, I'm glad that Rick brought that up. What if the leak also creates some slander type environments and everything? Because, there have been a lot of famous cases. There's one here in North Carolina. It actually became a TV show and everything called The Stair. Or The Stairway, something like that. But it was about the Michael Peterson case. And then, of course, there have been several other criminal cases as well that are known nationally and all along those lines, including the missing young lady. I think Bobby was the name or something along those lines and everything. But if some of these cases come out and the stories tell a viewpoint that might be considered slanderous to the person and everything, could that also be a reason for the leak to take place because you want to protect yourself, and two, that it can also cause some problems if it is leaking wrong information? Because I was wondering your thoughts about that. Because, like I said, I remember that famous case because that was the one that had the great owl theory that an owl did it, and all along those lines. But what are your thoughts when sometimes these books also come out that are some of the information might be leaked even from some of those trials? I mean, I don't know that we've known all the full details of the trial, even though that was a very public trial, but some of the things that the judge did and some of those people have passed on, if I remember correctly. But what if some of this new information comes out that changes the nature of it?
Well, see, Mark, I think slander and defamation cases are, and you can talk to other attorneys, they're very difficult to win. In other words, and I think there's a guy named Johnny Depp who's about to find out how difficult the legal process really is. It's really extremely difficult. The winners in those controversies are the lawyers. The lawyers on both sides will get paid. Okay. They secure that. In other words, the attorneys are good to making sure they get paid. Now, whether the people are fighting each other, I think it's Depp and this Heard lady, are they going to get heard or paid? Probably not. In other words, they're going to be the big losers in this game, and those are hard cases. When people say, "I'm going to sue you for defamation," "I'm going to sue you for slander," you can go read all the case law you want. Those are extremely difficult cases to win. I wouldn't even venture to go in that direction. You try to find somewhere else to go. Now, when it comes to these leaks in general, this is where I think they're actually, because what Rick just said, they're probably going to find eventually this person who leaked the information to this from the Supreme Court, because there's too many parties involved. There's the person who leaked and the person who received it, and sooner or later something will break, and they're going to find out this person leaked the information. Now the question is, what are they going to do about it? In other words, what is the Supreme Court going to do? Let's say it's a law clerk. Well, to get a law clerk in front of the Supreme Court, you generally have connections, money, power, etc. You just don't walk in and say, "Hey, I went to law school and I'm a law clerk." So you're going to find somebody that's pretty high up there who is going to get prosecuted in the area if it is a law clerk or an employee, and that drama will continue to unfold, I believe. Now in the military, I don't know, but I mean, if there's somebody that's leaking in the military, I don't think people like Chris just pat them on the back and say, "Sure, go ahead and give all the information out." I believe the military will also, they have the UMCJ, I think the Uniform
UCMJ,
Court of Military Justice. It's a whole different world in of itself. Uniform Code of Military Justice. You have attorneys that specialize in the area, and I think anybody who does stuff like that are in a world of hurt.
Yes, well, they are.
Yeah.
Of course, it all depends on rank, right? So you got a situation like Walker, who was a Navy chief petty officer, who was a warrant officer, who leaked all kind of information, used his son to continue that leaking, and this was not, gentlemen, this wasn't like nicey leaks. This was big time. This was called the leak. This was called the leak above all leaks. Basically, what they did was they released the code books for the crypto. I can't believe I'm saying the code books for the crypto equipment that gave the capability to transmit very, very, very sensitive information from one point to another point. And I was sitting in Italy at the time, and we had this, what they call a critical information. I mean, this was really critical stuff. And I was the staff duty officer at that point in time, went to the comm center and said, "Look, I need to send this out." And he goes, "We can't." And I said, "What do you mean you can't?" This is not like, I got to get this out within so many minutes. This is like, we got to get this out to the White House, whatever. "We cannot do it. The best we can do is to transmit it this way, but it's going to take an hour." And I said, what the hell? What's going on? And he goes, "I can't say, I can't tell you, but we cannot transmit it over this specific set of equipment." Right. And I'm telling you right now, that could have cost lives. I mean, and the thing was that whole situation was, this guy went on and on and on. His son got all through, because people know that finally the son just came forward. He just had enough. I mean, he just,
but Chris,
you say, Bill, the informed conscience thing, right? He settled so big.
Yeah, speaking of informed conscience and speaking of those kind of rules and everything, this is a question I've got for you, Chris, because I actually used to love watching these shows and everything. But there were movies or TV shows like Jag, and I think there were a couple of other ones as well. And if you watch those shows, a lot of their shows were based on real life incidences that took place. Of course, they did what they do in all of those shows. They changed the name in order to protect the innocent and sometimes the guilty as well. So I guess in this conversation of leaks, that's my question for you, is how much of those shows are realistic? And I did hear that quite a few of those cases that they were even telling the stories about were based on real life cases, that they got information from somebody in the military about such case and that happened, and then they Hollywoodized it and everything along that line. But some of those cases might still be sensitive to some of those people and all along those lines. So in that case, wouldn't a leak be maybe a detriment? Some of those leaks that were coming from the military and turned into TV shows.
Well, first of all, that's open case. Those are open case law. I mean, UCMJ at the age of 23, by the age of 35, I was on a court martial. I was a witness in a court martial. And at the age of 23, I had the ability to send people to court martial at the age of 23 years old. I had no law experience other than UCMJ. We had to know that. And I could, based on that, I could write up a series of specifications and I could send people to court martial. And it was like, I could make that happen. Now I was in an intelligence area. So we had one case in particular where this is absolutely unbelievable, but it happened, where a young man was writing a book. So he had decided, he was an airman, he had decided that the best way to do reference material was back in his dormitory. So he took classified information, books, classified information, and put them in his dormitory and just put them, in his locker, basically. And then referred to them, writing the book and whatever else. And it was the roommate that said, hey, this is craziness. They went in, they did a search, they opened it up, they found all kind of information, all kind of problems there. There's another guy. Now that's one case. Another case is a contractor. And let me tell you something. It's almost every single leak has happened from a single contractor. I won't name the contractor because then I get sued. But basically, it's this guy was a contractor for 12 years. I think it was 12 years. He was writing a dissertation. Bill, you'd appreciate this. And if you're a PhD candidate, you need to reference information, right? So he took this information. You guys are all doctors on it. Yeah, and you need same thing with you, Mark. Both Marks. You need your reference material. He took it. They found petabytes of information in this guy's shed, in his house, in the trunk of his car. I mean, so since 1996, I think it was, and they caught him. I think so. It was almost 20 years. He had been hoarding this information, just taking it out, just taking sheet at a time, a little bit at a time, whatever else. And of course, he's serving big time. I think he got his. And I'm not sure about this, but I'm almost sure. I think he got his PhD. I think the research was good. So I mean, hey, we got to get the academics, right? Bill
got his PhD, even though he's got to spend it in prison and everything.
Yeah. So yeah, he's gonna
it's PhD in media research, I guess.
Yeah, right. But anyways, those are that's what I'm talking about, Mark. So anyways, I'm sorry, guys.
Rick's got a thought.
Go, Rick. Sorry.
So the better that blockchain technology gets, the more humans are the weak link. The better that the cybersecurity gets. The blockchain technology spends all this computational energy to make things impossible to break, but you can always social engineer somebody. Just honeypot them or just whatever, manipulate them. I mean, that's how they got the Democrats' emails was phishing emails, just like some guy wasn't paying attention, hit the wrong button, and all that technology was for naught.
Well, Rick,
I've got good news for you.
Do you know what his password was? Do you know what the guy's password was on the Democrat that they got the email? Password. It was password. That was his password. Password was password. That's how. I mean, I'm not saying he deserved it. Don't get me wrong, but that was the password. The password was password.
That's just crazy. But Rick, I'm glad that you brought up blockchain and everything along those lines, because I can tell you, having worked also in educational grading and educational kind of things along that standpoint, is that fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, yes, computers have gotten really good at dictating and getting information. But as I'm sure that even Bill will be able to know from his college teaching and things of that nature, they've not quite gotten good at nuance. So they will see a whole bunch of jumble letters and not know what to do with it. So then they'll send it back to you, and they'll also see conversations that they don't quite understand because it's slang and other things. So until they can actually do some of the things that humans do in the sense of nuance, I think that there will still have to be a human element there as well. But what are your thoughts around that, Bill? Because it does seem like, yes, computers are doing a lot of great development, but they haven't quite got into our nuance fields yet.
Yeah, no, nuance is critical. I mean, for example, if you learn a foreign language, you can make an easy grammatical mistake And they'll say, this guy is obviously a fake. Well, wasn't it in World War II? They had some really good American German speakers who acted as spies. They were undetectable. There was a 60-minute story about it. Not everybody qualified for that level of expertise, but the nuance is really critical. But you know what? In the remaining minutes, there's another issue. How do you prevent leaks? I have some friends in Silicon Valley in software development, and they never have the big picture of what they're developing. Well, they know the big picture, but they don't know all the elements that go into it. So the teams all have individual modules that they're creating. So no one can then say, I know the total, software scheme and I can sell it. They might be able to sell part of it, but this idea of compartmentalization is really critical. And that was true in the Manhattan Project and developing of nuclear weapons. I advise you, go visit the Oak Ridge, Tennessee lab museum. It's absolutely fascinating, and how nobody knew what the total process was. Well, maybe one person did, or a very small group.
A very small group.
Yeah, but a need to know. But there are very good scientists who knew exactly what to do, but that one part could not solve any puzzle to somebody who didn't have the rest of the pieces.
Well, what I find out is they just, like on media, Bill, they won't even come on the shows. I'm going to have a couple people on, one from the Epic Games, who Mark Themig will probably know about, but very reluctant to get them on the show because they go, really, they don't want us to talk to the media about anything. In other words, zero. And then another person from the Cato Institute, the same thing. In other words, what happens with a lot of these people, they don't want to talk about anything. So what happens is, to keep the information from leaking, they just don't even discuss it. I mean, it's really, from what I've seen, or they do like you say, they compartmentalize. So they'll have a piece over here, this other person will have a piece over there, but no one has the total picture. So no one can come in, reverse engineer, and just take the system away from people. Yeah, Rick.
In the future, an increasing problem will be machine learning privacy, or just inscrutability. That, there's Terminator had Skynet, where the robots get really smart and they decide to kill everybody. That's not going to happen. But what is happening, and what will happen increasingly, is that humans will just be cogs in systems where we, the humans, don't really have a good idea of how the AI systems are reaching their conclusions. Like Google Translate apparently has its own internal language because it's easier to translate from that non-transparent machine-developed language than to go from, say, Hungarian to Finnish. You don't want to go to direct from one to the other. Google takes it and runs it through this weird synthetic thing that's just kind of grown within it.
Yep.
And
and all of our shows are monitored by bots. While we were talking, we got banned from Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups, by the way, in case you guys didn't know. Now, what do we get banned for? Okay.
What do we get banned for?
Too many views again. I mean, that happens, in other words, quite often. In other words, a lot of people watching. And then for some reason on Vimeo, we get like 34,000 views in Arlington, Virginia, which I believe is military installations for somebody who's scanning all the information. I'm not kidding. I don't know why, but all of a sudden in certain areas, anything that we broadcast, we're being watched, which is just bizarre.
Is it the Pentagon in Arlington, if I remember correctly, Chris?
I don't know.
Close. The Pentagon's close. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. But for some reason, you can actually watch the people that watch us. You can go to Vimeo and then you type in the Pod TV network. Then you go pull and you see all these people. It's either bots or somebody collecting all the information, because they're really monitoring the media very closely. And in China, we're banned just generally. In other words, I've yet to be able to get into China. A lot of the other countries are pretty easy.
Well,
but,
you also have to love some of those translation points. And
we're banned in Russia also.
Yeah.
But Russians work around us, and the Russians actually watch a lot of our shows.
Yeah,
But
I think Chris had a point to make, but I was just going to say you got to love some of those translation programs, because some of those, if you hear their interpretations versus what you actually said, they're nowhere close and all of that. But Chris, what are your thoughts?
Just real quick, a leak that never happened. So D-Day, right? All of a sudden, Eisenhower, a bunch of press people had the date. They knew it was going to be June the 6th. They knew that people were going to be going on ships or wherever else they saw it all. And Eisenhower met with them and said, please do not report this. If you report it, I said, I'm not going to hold you. I'm not going to, arrest you, but please do not. If you report this, you're going to cost the lives of many Allied soldiers.
That's right.
Hold your reporting. And to a person, they held that reporting. So I think sometimes you're right, Bill. It has to do with that, what is your conscience willing to allow, and what is it willing to not allow? And that's the 1940s, a whole different.
Well, you can even go back before that. I mean, one of the things that propelled the whole notion of the Vietnam War not being a great war to be in was the image that was put out there of that person being slaughtered and everything along those lines. And that was a case of the media choosing not to hold back information and to actually release it. So they could have done the opposite. They could have just held on to it and done like you're saying that they did with the D-Day. But they felt that in this particular case, the greater good was going to be to actually see this person being massacred. And the same can be said with what happened with the civil rights movement, because it wasn't for those images of people having the water turned on them and the dogs turned on them, and definitely a lot of people being trampled and things along those lines. I don't know that we would have had the kind of civil rights actions as fast as we did. I think that it would have eventually happened, but I don't know that it would have happened as fast, because that changed people's mindsets about what was going on in the South. And to your favorite place, Nick, China, I wonder what would have happened if we had not seen the images of Tiananmen Square and that whole thing.
From what I understand, there was a lot of images in Tiananmen Square that we did not see.
That's correct.
But so the thing is, we only saw part of it, and the rest of it was completely repressed. And so they control. One thing I must admit about China, they control the information really, really well over in China, to the point where even like if we say something bad about them, we get banned, because I do try to ship some information over to them. But if it doesn't comport with their narrative, we're immediately taken off any of the Chinese places. They really do control the media. Russia right now, we've been banned. We used to be in Russia just straight. Now they watch us, but they do a workaround to watch us, because they can't watch anything that we say directly, because we have too much of a pro-Ukrainian group on some of our shows. And so the thing is, and that's like banned. That's threat of death or 15 years in jail, Mark. So my visa to Russia, which you have to get a visa to get in there, canceled. I mean, forget it. We're not going to go to Russia anytime soon. But there's two aspects to it. One, there's the leaking aspect, but number two, the greater threat may be the banning aspect, which goes on all the time. In other words, for things that you don't even know about, because robots do a lot of the review today, and then they determine you talk too much about COVID-19, you talk too much about Russia, you had too many views on your station, and they shut you down just like that instantaneously. I've been playing with this for quite some time, so I have a couple workarounds that I do, but I have to actually go in and work around it. Because directly they'll just ban us. So we're still broadcasting on LinkedIn. They just won't let us go to LinkedIn groups. They just shut us off because of too many views. We're weird. The media is weird, and I think it's going to continue changing. With that, we're at the hour, so we do want to thank our guest, Rick Grosner, Mark Themig, Bill Danko, and Chris Greco. We'll see you next week on the media show. Until then, don't leak anything that could get you in trouble. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Chris, don't do that leak. We know you were going to do it.